Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker, and it is my honor to have Dr. Heather Davis today with us. She is going to be talking to us about spoken word poetry and hopefully giving us a little insight into the famous person behind spoken word poetry herself. Heather, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here, Becky. Thank you for asking me.
Welcome. Heather, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am, gosh, I don't know. I am a scholar and I have been blessed to be able to write um, for a living, in different ways. Research, I'm a researcher and, I do all kinds of things, but I don't really know however to talk to folks about that. But that's what I do for a living, and I take care of special needs cats and just a whole bunch of different things that I do that I'm a DJ as well.
And you have
Uh,
Scottish roots.
yes, that's true. I am you hear this accent because I was born in Tennessee. And my father's was from here. My mother's from Scotland, so I'm a dual national. I come and go between the two countries. I happen to be here now for the last several years. Not well, yeah, I would say several years while I got my PhD. And before that was living in Scotland for a very long time. So it's been a long time since I lived in Tennessee, but it's nice to be here.
Well, we are blessed in Tennessee to have you, Heather. So Heather, how long have you been a poet and specifically a writer? Because I know you said you've done a lot of research papers and things like that, which is a whole type of
Mhm.
headache in itself. But
Yes.
tell us about like your experience with poetry.
So I didn't start writing professionally until about 7 years ago. And I did that because I had cancer and I decided that I was going to try to um, do all the things that I'd always wanted to do but hadn't done yet. And that was one of them. And I wrote a poem about my cancer experience that I submitted to the very last issue of the Knoxville Mercury, and he published it as a open letter to everyone, and it was my first experience and I just never looked back. And so I then decided I wanted to try spoken word. I had heard about I had never done spoken word. I didn't know anything about it. It had been recommended to me by one of my professors as a way to help with my
Hmm.
um, my voice and my projection and strengthening because the cancer had been attached to one of my vocal cords. And so I had lost a lot of strength around that. So because I do creative methodologies in my research as well, so I research some really heavy, difficult topics, but I do creative methods. That was one of the options that she recommended. And so I went out along to one of the local open mics and started from there, and then got to know some of the folks doing spoken word and was very lucky to be part of a group called the Fifth Woman for a while, and learned everything I know about spoken word from those folks. So, and then, in fact, met John Manoni and Annie um, at one of the local writers groups, and learned all about page poetry, as we call it, and never looked back from there either. So that's how I got, and I've been doing that now, along with other types of creative writing for about 7 years.
Heather, tell us about spoken word poetry because it is it sounds like it's has its history, that goes way back, like into the 40s and the 50s.
Oh yes, it is it all depends on who you are. Um, there are different types of spoken word, and I'm certainly not an expert on them. I don't necessarily do what most people think of as spoken word, which is slam poetry, which is the kind that you do really fast in 3 minutes, and that's where a lot of the competitions are. I have done a couple of those, and I was very fortunate to have a poem that won a super amateur version of a contest. But
Congratulations.
so I'm not one of those spoken word poets. Spoken word is, oh gosh, it just depends on who you talk to. For me, I'm a slow spoken word performer. So it has really no structure in terms of writing,
Hmm.
but it has a sort of structure in terms of how you tell the story of the poetry um that you're telling. You'll hear a lot of poets doing it within a certain cadence and a certain projection. A lot of times they say we're very angry poets.
Hmm.
Um, but really, I think the best definition I ever heard was from a major poet down in Atlanta, and he said it's another form of storytelling. It's a poetic form of storytelling, and it is a great equalizer in the sense that anyone can do it. Um, People get very, very good at it. They become um, they're able to speak at presidential inaugurations, which is fantastic, you know. And some people are just professionals. And I am a professional, but I'm an amateur professional. So I'm not actively doing it at the moment. And there are people that are absolutely, they travel the country doing it. They're very well known in it. So it just depends on who you're talking to, what the definition of it is. But I
Hmm.
see it as a type of poetry that allows you to stand up on a stage and perform it. And it's different from reading it. You have to memorize it. You don't have to memorize it. You have to memorize slam. Um, well, and sometimes people don't, but it's a nature of performing the poetry. And it's like storytelling, but it's a mixture of acting and poetry all together. I don't know. It's so hard to
Do
explain, but
you
I'm
use
def
props?
you can. It is like an acting performance
Okay.
with poetry. So um and for me, I tend to act out things, and there are props. We've had in the groups that I was in, we've had lots of props. It's almost like a poetic form of, it can be like a musical theater in certain ways. Um, so certainly I did one thing with a group that I was in with the Fifth Woman, and we were doing it with the Knoxville Symphony Orchestra, for example. So it's just all kinds of different ways, and anyone can do it. You just, it's just practice and presence, really. So I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but it's kind of whatever you want to make of it there are ways to train for it. A lot of people in theater do spoken word. So
And how would you train for that type of a performance? Are there vocal exercises that you do, or you set a
mhm.
timer, or do you have
Yes.
someone monitor you? How do you actually prep for that kind of thing?
Well, the way I did it was what I did was I would go to open mics and watch the folks that I knew were doing it professionally, and learn about the kinds of things they would write about, which could be anything, but how they did their cadence, how they did their stage presence, what topics they were focusing on that would allow them to um, kind of hit a emotional impact.
Hmm.
All poetry does that, but and learn a little bit of stage presence. I certainly am one of the, I would say, weaker people in that respect. The professionals really have this fantastic stage presence. And so I think for me, the way I learned was once I watched them for a long time and got the courage to try out for one of the groups, which turned out to be the Fifth Woman. It was just being around them and learning from them. And they would teach you how to speak, how to project your voice, how, if you were doing vocal exercises. One of the big things I learned was make sure when you're practicing to have as loud noise as you possibly can in the background.
Oh.
Because if you practice in the quiet, like I did originally, as soon as you get on stage and you hear a noise, it's going to distract you. So you practice with lots of noise in the background. And and then you practice how to just like you would in the theater. It's a lot of theater work, and but also how to write. It's a very different way of writing. It's like having a short story in some ways, and some people are very structured, but I've always been a very slow spoken word storyteller. So best way I would say is just go out to an open mic, meet some people, find out about the local groups that are around you, and get to know those folks. There are wonderful ones here in Chattanooga and all over the state, and or anywhere you happen to be. I guarantee you, there's probably somebody doing spoken word. I mean, be mindful of just like any other thing of the groups that you're getting involved in, um, but learn, those are the folks that can teach you. It's really like a sport. You have to do it to practice it. I mean, to learn it really well. And so it's best when you're doing spoken word. You can learn on YouTube even. You can go to YouTube and see lots and lots of people and just practice, practice, practice. So you do practice it
Okay.
a lot. But there are times when you get on the stage and you forget it or little parts of it. Or there's times when you get on the stage and you can read the audience and know that, okay, maybe I should throw this in or that in. Some people never change what they're saying. I'm notorious for ad-libbing. I am absolutely, it's the reason I write the way I do, because I want to give myself the space that if I forget, because I'm older than a lot of people that do spoken word and I forget. um and so I always wrote in space for me to ad lib. A lot of people just memorize it, and they don't veer from that. So it can go either way. Whatever way you're most comfortable with. I tend to always ad lib if I'm finding that especially if I think, because my sense of humor is really dry. I'm very Scottish. And it doesn't it doesn't go down very well here sometimes. There will be a lot of times I'm trying to do something I think is funny and nobody's laughing. So I've had to learn to adapt to that really well. So it just depends on who the person is.
So what are the topics that you find that really interest you to write about?
So one of the things I did, a lot of spoken word is very political, but I tended to shy away from that for a very, very long time.
Mhm.
I actually don't recommend this. I was overly, I was spoken word because people are hearing it from you and they don't know you. I was very open emotionally, keeping in mind I was in the middle of cancer recovery. Not, I hadn't, I was just, literally just out of treatment, not long out of treatment, still going through everything.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to talk about those experiences. And so I was extremely personal in what I was talking about. Some people do that. Most of the people, there's no topic that isn't touchable. It's just that you have to be smart about what you're talking about in certain crowds. And that was a heavy lesson I learned. You've got to know where you're at and the crowd you're in front of. A lot of it is political. A lot of it is about family or about friendships or the beauty of you name it, just like page poetry. It's exactly like that.
It's just what you're interested in and what you're passionate about, and it comes across, but you have to know your
Yes.
audience.
Yes.
Um,
Now, when you're doing the group sessions, like when you're doing a performance, there
mhm.
is a theme there that you're working to. You still write your version of the poem and it feeds in, and then you work together as your group to modify it and make sure it fits within the theme, because you're presenting basically like a theater show. And and it's just like us when we do our ekphrastic poetry group, we're writing to a theme in that circumstance. But yes, that's exactly right.
And speaking of groups, so you talked about being in a couple of groups. So tell us, are you still involved in any group? And if so, why is that
No.
important to you?
Well, I'm not, and there's a reason I'm not. It's that I got to the part of my PhD program where I was working on my dissertation, and I found that I couldn't do it all anymore. I had to focus. I was spending way too much time being a poet and a creative and a professional person in that regard, and not nearly as much time as I needed to get that dissertation done. And I had to agree, I had to agree um, to put that as the priority. But also my father passed away, and so that was a really hard time for me to try to continue doing anything creative. We had, COVID came along and it changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And I took the decision that for me right now was the time not to be out and about and involved in that, because it's just so great that you can get, you know, and I knew I wasn't really, I was not going to pursue the professional level of it. Well, I wanted to, but I knew that what was involved was beyond what I was going to do. So, but I am involved in a lot of well, not a lot. I finally settled on, I've got to focus on where I want to write, and that turned out to be the group that you and I are involved in. And so for me, that became the place that I wanted to put my energies, and because I still have so much to learn about writing that type of poetry. And so that's where I've ended up. I've been in a lot of different places and a lot of different, you know, you name it, I've tried it. But I think in the end, and I miss it. I do miss it. I'm not going to say I don't miss it. But I think at the end of the day, and I may go back to it at some point, but this was where I wanted to end up after all of that happened. So we'll see.
Well, yeah. I mean, you never know what the future's going to hold for you, Heather. And speaking of
Yes, yeah.
spoken word, would you share with us some of your special words?
Yes, I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one or two of the things that were published. So this is a poem called Child, and it was published many years ago now in Liquid Imagination,
Hmm.
and it was about my mother. So um and again, my mother is an immigrant from Scotland. And Scotland is popular now, but it wasn't always popular. So I think about those folks who are coming from other places where they are experiencing some of what we've experienced. Okay. I hear them whisper about us. I see my mama. I hear her accent, and I know that some people don't like where she comes from. She sits at the table with her coffee, and with that sadness in her eyes, she thinks I don't see. So I take her hand, and as we catch lightning bugs and see the stars in the night sky, we ground our feet in grass to remind us that the earth is ours too. We spy galaxies that take us far away from here because she is from far away from here, and it reminds her that we are found. She turns the news off and laughs great laughs of future hope and reads me stories of adventure, but not about princesses, because she says my greatness doesn't depend on being rescued. She lets me finish the stories, and I can see the endings this way. I know people hurt each other. I know they told us to go back home. I know he left us. I know they kill our men or lock them behind bars or walls, and our men kill us and lock us behind bars and walls of their making, too. I know we are not welcome here. I know that hate. But as long as she's in the world, there is life growing out of the smell of fresh cut grass and the air of the mountains and the salt of the desert and the sweat of our bodies designed to taste our freedom. And when she passes, she'll be the galaxies and the stars and the lightning bugs and memories so real I will feel her in the groove lines in my hands. My mama is in me and I am in the world, and she shows me that we can change universes.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
Thank you, Becky. This is almost the very first poem I ever wrote in my entire life. And this is a very old poem. I wrote it when I was in my 20s or so, 30s maybe, actually. And it's my most precious poem. Um, it has been altered from what I originally wrote it to make it publishable.
Hmm.
So, but it's called Holy Color. This is about the meeting of my mother and father um, when they met one another, and then a subsequent person I met afterwards. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And this was published in American Diversity Report, which the great Deborah Levine was part of. Okay, so your echoes linger on the edges in the Smoky Mountain fog, in petal red or blue. The poet's everywhere tint infiltrates insidiously, glancing, gliding under my skin. Move on, you whisper. No more time for love. Love grown out of Tennessee barn oak floated on Scottish dry docks. Love grown out of 3,000 miles of red, white, and blue. Now we walk past the Cherokee land until we spy the seagull's wings, sail east, then up the River Clyde to Dunoon, where sailors and war brides married, where mother met father, and I met you. But these mountains have been deceiving me for years. Hurry now, the mantra grows. Move on, past your foothills ghost, past the shipbuilder's lock, on past the struggle's end. Red only in the mountains' falling leaves, blue only in my eyes, and the holy color dying. So I have one more, but I think I'll stop actually, Becky, because the other one I've got is very, very long.
We
Um,
have time.
oh, we do. This is the poem that was this is not the version that was actually, let me see if I can find the version real quick. That was in the Knoxville Mercury.
And Heather, while you're looking that up, I don't want to run out of time. So tell us, where can people find your work?
So um they can find so there are so many Heather Davises in the world, and there are so many poets that are Heather Davis and writers. Normally, I don't have a website. Um, I am terrible for collecting and showcasing my own work. Um, so the only thing I can tell people is I had to do this myself today. I have to look up Heather A. Davis and hope that it's the right one. Um, I will, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, which I would be so surprised, Becky, that would be hilarious. Um, then I can certainly tell them um, where to find some of my work. But if you just look up Heather A. Davis, you should be able to. I'm kind of all over the place. I'm in like the National Academy of Medicine and all kinds of different places. So um, unlike our fellow poets who have great collections, I am the worst about doing things like that. So or having a website or even a Facebook page. So
We're all very different, aren't we?
yeah. Um, okay, let's see. I will give you this one. This was the, as it was published, very first thing I published that brought me into the realm of the poets that I know now. And this was the one in the Knoxville Mercury. It is long, so if we run out of time, you just let me know and I'll see what I can do. The Knoxville Mercury, this was its very last edition, and he put me in as a guest editor. So it's called When You Become a Pre-Existing Condition. I had just come back from Scotland,
Mhm.
where this doesn't exist, where at, in the days long ago, as you know, they could, insurance companies could deny us insurance if we had pre-existing conditions. So that's what this is based off of, and the difference that had changed with the ACA. So,
Mhm.
okay. When you're swallowing a pill full of radiation while sitting in a hospital room next to one of the kindest men you've ever met, a hospital worker who is holding your hand and who is crying because he has the same thyroid cancer you have, and he worries about the effect the radiation will have on his ability to have children if the time comes for him to swallow the pill. When you are so sick that you can't hold your head up, and finally a doctor listens, tells you that you've had thyroid cancer for approximately 5 years, and you rage and scream the world down around you. When they say this is the good cancer, and yet you know others are dying from it, and they've just issued guidance against screening for life-saving neck checks, when you become a pre-existing condition. When, just in case, you go to the lawyer to draw up your will and your powers of attorney, then to the cemetery to pick out and prepay for your burial plot, and you put away the thought that you're too young for this. When you lose almost every current friend because they're scared of what's happening to you and your erratic emotions, and they're sick of hearing how sick you are, but you don't blame them because you want to run as far away from this as you can, too. When you handwrite letters to former friends or lovers to thank them for their kindness and the good things they did, even when you were a jerk, but you leave off your return address and leave out the fact that you have cancer because it's too painful to think about them not writing back. When you start to lie on the floor every night in the dark, begging, pleading, and bargaining for your life with the God you're so afraid of and now believe is punishing you or teaching you a lesson, and you're too afraid to utter a bad word, think a bad thought, do a bad deed, give a bad look at another human being, because if you just do the right thing, it will go away and the punishment will stop. When your surgeon chooses to leave a small remnant of the tumor so that he doesn't have to cut your vocal cord nerve and take away your ability to speak forever, and when your doctors are compassion embodied, when you fought so long against the cult of positivity, and you have to face the impact that hope and positivity can have on your mind, your body, your spirit, because despair is a great redeemer. When you finally find the thyroid cancer support group, beautiful, courageous people who showed you you're not alone, who know exactly what you're going through, and who encourage you every day to arrest your falling apart so that in time you can do the same for others. When the counselor at the Free Services Cancer Support Community Center helps you finally get the help you need because you don't understand that your anxiety is too high even for a cancer patient. The THICA can do this to you when you have limited capacity to regulate chemical or hormonal imbalances, and the helpers you find change your life. When your endocrine system starts to level out with life-saving medication. When you finally listen to your colleagues and start that PhD, and you set up a partnership across countries, and the scientist doctor you worked with there and the professors you just met here are willing to take a chance on you, and your health inequalities research over the next 5 years, and you decide you'll show up for your life, just like they're showing up for your life. When you write over the next 5 years for the first time. When you're walking or dancing or moving in some way, and you start to really feel your body and the miracle of its movement and its natural endorphins, a numinous connection nothing else can produce in you. And for the first time in your life, you know your body is not the enemy. When you're lying on the floor in the darkness with only the cats around you, and you're thanking God now instead, and slowly and painfully you start to feel there is love and comfort there, and that this love is God, is all beliefs and none, all knowledge, all wisdom, all peace, in whatever way God appears or is uttered in people's lives. When you can no longer go a second without being plugged into that love and joy and peace. When you reconcile that no matter what happens or what you did or what you ate or what you drank or what you didn't do, it's not your fault you have cancer. When you can think of the future and take calculated or spontaneous risks and see life ahead. When you vote for legislators who've been representing your community for nearly 30 years and who promise you they won't take away coverage for pre-existing conditions, only to learn the hard truth is that that is exactly what they voted for. When you start meeting the amazing people from all walks of life, politicians, doctors, nurses, teachers, journalists, secretaries, cleaners, farm workers, artists, who are working for healthcare rights because they're just like you, and you raise your voice with them because you still have a voice, and you're not going down without a fight when there is so much, and there are so many for whom to fight.
You are so brave, Heather. To share that, with us. Wow, what an incredible, vulnerable thing to
Well, I
do.
have to thank Mr. Turson because he took a chance. He absolutely, that was the first time I'd ever submitted anything. I never dreamed in a million years that he would, and he just contacted me within days and said, I'm going to publish this. And this is my last thing, and I'm making it on the front page. And I owe him forever. He just took a chance, and he changed my life. So thank you, Becky. It's I think a lot about people that go through these things, and we all go through so much, especially over the last several years. So
And I
thank you for
think your
letting me share that.
Oh, I think, Heather, that your work is going to inspire so many people.
Wow.
What a legacy that you have. And I'm so glad that you're here on this earth to share that with us.
Well, I'm thankful for you too. So are you, Becky.